Hello everyone, this is the final chapter 15 video for the EDSP 2100 course. First of all, let's go ahead and have you open up chapter 15 with activities, PowerPoint. And you'll see very beginning, I want you to watch the world of transition. Let's start this chapter out right by giving you a chance to view the world of transition. So go ahead and do that and then come back. Okay, this week here, you'll see the very next slide has the assignments for you. Pretty easy week, especially if you've got done well at getting your differentiated instruction done throughout the week. You just need to finish up your top 10 list and make sure and follow the rubric along with the chapter quiz and final discussion board. Disregard the next slide if you're an online version. And we're going to go on to the next few. I'm going to kind of delete some. You can look at them if you want, but it's basically for my face-to-face class. So you can look at them. I'm going to hide them, but you can still see them if you want to look at them. So transitioning to adulthood. I'm going to leave some of the quiz items down, some of the past quiz items, so that you kind of get an idea of some of the questions. And then let's go down to focus questions. You'll be able to answer the following questions. Why should post-school outcomes drive educational programming for secondary students with disabilities? You'll be able to answer what key factors influence the success of an individualized transition plan, or ITP. You'll be able to answer how can teachers of elementary students with disabilities help them prepare for successful life as adults. You'll be able to answer why is self-determination so important to students with disabilities' success in post-secondary education. Answer how do the philosophy and principles of supported living differ from traditional residential placement services, and answer the last two. How can teachers help school-age children with disabilities achieve satisfying recreation and leisure as adults, and is quality of life for adults with disabilities the ultimate outcome measure for special education? Why or why not? Have a first question. Why should post-school outcomes drive educational programming for secondary students with disabilities? So look back at your reading. If you haven't read, give it your best shot and then come back and we'll answer that questions. First of all, when developing an individualized transition plan, or ITP, for secondary students with disabilities, the question guiding the selection of each objective should be, will the student need this skill when he is 21? The goal of transition planning is to enable the student to function as independently as possible when he becomes an adult. The multidisciplinary team should select only the goals and objectives that will contribute to the post-school success of the student with disabilities. And we've got some data to help that here. How do former special education students fare as adults? Well, the results of the National Longitudinal Transition Studies 2, completed in high school, in 2000-2001, 72% of students with disabilities graduated from high school with either a regular diploma or certificate of completion. In that, the employment status numbers, the unemployment rate for young adults with disabilities is 57% when they have been out of school during the first 4 years. Post-secondary education, 45% of youth with disabilities enrolled in post-secondary education compared to 41% of youth without disabilities. Some more data. Community involvement. 49% of young adults participated in some type of community social activities outside of work or school in the preceding year. 28% of out-of-school high school youth had been arrested at some time, compared to 12% of youth with general population. And only 60% of youth with disabilities ages 15 to 19 reported that they thought of themselves as able to handle challenges or feeling useful and important. So let's look at some transition service models. The book discusses Will's Bridges model, the school to work transition. It has 3 levels of service in that one: generic, time-limited transition services, and ongoing support. It also mentions the Halpern's 3-dimensional model, which has 3 domains: the quality of residential environment, adequacy of social interpersonal network, and meaningful employment. I want you to take a little more time and look through those different service models to help you get a better idea of what we're going to be talking about in this chapter. IDEA and transition services. Transition is a process involving the coordination, delivery, and transfer of services from school to post-secondary agencies. The definition of transition services in IDEA that you'll see in the IEP: results-oriented process based upon the student's individual needs and preferences to facilitate movement to post-school activities. This includes post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and community participation. So when you're looking at these, post-secondary education, college, trade school, community colleges, things like that, vocational education, VR can help get some of these things looked at. That's why I highly suggest that you start discussing vocational rehabilitation when they're a junior at least. And that way, when they're at the end of their junior year, most times you can get them eligible, and you can have VR come in and talk to families and get students eligible so that their senior year they are set up and ready to go. And then set up a time that voc rehab person can come in and talk to all of your students. If you're the teacher, maybe talk to the process coordinator or the special ed person in your building about setting up a time that they could come in and talk with voc rehab on a certain day each month. And voc rehab normally is pretty good about coming in and doing that. Maybe it's getting a student involved in a local community college, or maybe a place in your area where there's community classes that they can take. And then independent living instruction. Let's look at the next question. What are the most important factors in determining the success of an ITP, or individualized transition plan? Write that down, pause the video, and then come back, please. Well, the answer: nowhere in special education is teaming and collaboration more important than they are when planning and delivering services for secondary students. The factors most likely to determine success of an individualized transition plan include the student's involvement, family involvement, and collaboration by professionals involved. That would include outside agencies involved in that too. Cooperation and communication between and among professionals and families are critical to effective transition planning. Next, I want you to look at the video. Next video, example of transition services, will give you a sampling of a couple students and transition service. Again, to give you, I think, a better idea of what it's all about and get you in the right track. So go ahead and pause my video and open up that one. All right. The Individualized Transition Plan, or ITP, details the curricular programming and other supports that prepare the student for a smooth and successful transition to adult life. When a student reaches ages 16, IDEA requires the IEP team to begin transition planning. There's an annual review and update. There's appropriate measurable transitional goals based on age-appropriate transition assessments. Those in Missouri are Form C items. And then you'll put this into the PLEF also. The transitional services need to assist the child in reaching these goals. And beginning not later than a year before the child reaches age of majority, a statement that the child has been informed of the child's rights that will transfer to the child at age of majority. So most schools before age 17 will send out a letter to the parents at that point and let the student know about the age of majority. At the age 18, the responsibility reverts over to the student unless the parent has worked out legal documents that will give them guardianship past that point. So the parents then have a year. I would definitely start talking about transition, though, in a general sense, starting that freshman year. For those students that are more in inclusive classrooms, that are more functional, lower functioning ID students, and some of the other more severe, parents need to know that this needs to happen. Because once they're 18, it's the student's responsibility, and if the student wants to be out of special education, it's pretty easy for them to say so, and then they would not have an IEP. So make sure you get that taken care of. Age-appropriate transition assessment includes a combination of formal and informal assessment methods. I've included some of the past documents in the folder, so make sure and look through that about some informal assessments that I have worked and done with in the schools in the past. Measurable post-secondary goals, those goals that a child hopes to achieve after leaving secondary school. Transition services, again, a coordinated set of transition-related instructional strategies and activities. And then their annual IEP goals must simultaneously teach academic and transition-related skills. These are where most of the goal sheets will have 3 different buttons or 3 different check boxes that will say if they are related to a transitional goal. And if they are, you need to check mark that. Coordinated transition services with adult agencies involve interdisciplinary teaming and interagency collaboration during those last few years and of that ITP. Just because we talk about voc rehab the last couple of years, with some students, you may need to include the Board of Services or another independent living agency that's in your area, and the family may already be involved in that service, and you need to make sure and include that as soon as you understand that they're involved in a service and get their input. And then lastly, the summary of performance and academic achievement, functional performance, and recommendation for continued progress. This document is typically given during that last year. I normally gave it to the students during that first, about a week or so before their graduation date, and then mailed it out right after graduation so that I was for sure that they did graduate, and then gave them that document. Another question for you to answer: how can teachers help elementary students with disabilities prepare for successful employment as adults? Because some of you may be thinking, I'm not going to be a high school teacher, or maybe a middle school teacher, because they could turn 16 during that last IEP there. But let's think about it. Write down what your thoughts are and then come back to my video. Well, according to IDEA, a statement of transition service needs must be included in the student's IEP at age 14. And an individual transition plan must be developed by age 16. However, preparing students with disabilities to function successfully in the real world should begin as early as possible. Teachers can begin preparing elementary children with disabilities for adulthood by targeting skills such as social interaction, functional academics like telling time and counting money, daily living, going over eating habits and self-care, and lastly, choice making. Make sure that you're giving that a part in your curriculum. Additionally, teachers should expose students to the variety of career opportunities and leisure activities available to them. Employment. Work is defined as using one's physical or mental energies to accomplish something productive. For most adults with disabilities, obtaining and holding a job is a major life challenge and goal. Begin their career education early. Elementary students can sample different types of classroom responsibilities. Middle school students can spend time at actual community job sites. And high school students can develop and operate school-based business enterprises. I've seen coffee shops in a high school. I've seen school supplies being able to be bought in a high school. They can get a lot of inventory, giving cash back, using the cash register. All sorts of skills can be utilized in that situation. Employment continued. Competitive employment performs work valued by an employer, functions in an integrated setting with coworkers without disabilities, and earns at or above the minimum wage. Some key characteristics of school programs that increase likelihood of successful employment outcomes. Number one, stress functional skills. They receive ample opportunities to learn social and interpersonal skills and they begin community-based work experience as early as 10 to 13 for students with severe disabilities. It's very important. Supported employment is defined as competitive employment in an integrated setting with most ongoing support services for individuals with the most severe disabilities. There are 4 models of supported employment. There's small business enterprise, there's mobile work crews, there's enclaves or clustered placement, and individual placement. You will want to look at these models and understand each one of them for your upcoming quiz, and it will help you understand how you might be able to implement some in your future job as a teacher. Employment specialists, they're natural supports in work situations. There's also natural cues and self-management that can be utilized. Then there's sheltered employment. Refers to work by people with disabilities at an accredited occupational-oriented facility which employs people with disabilities. Most common vocational setting for adults with severe disabilities. They offer transitional and extended employment. And shelter workshops provide evaluation and training for community-based employment, extended or long-term employment, and work activities. The problems with sheltered employment include limited opportunities for job placement and also low pay. Another question for you. Why are self-determination skills so important for the success of students with disabilities in post-secondary education? So if you will look at that and then come back once you are done, and we'll answer that. Well, by the time typically developed young adults grow into adulthood, they gain a measure of freedom to make choices about their own life. This can and should be no different for adults with disabilities. Self-management and self-determination are important skills for young adults that enable effective goal setting, planning, studying, and self-advocacy needed to succeed in college. Post-secondary education significantly improves chances of meaningful employment. Increasingly, jobs require technical training, problem solving, and interpersonal skills that can be attained through post-secondary education. The percentage of first-time, full-time freshmen enrolling in college who indicate they have a disability is growing. Participation in the labor force rises 50.3% for individuals with disabilities who obtain a 4-year degree. Even youths with significant disabilities like intellectual disabilities, autism, or multiple disabilities can participate in some aspects of college life. The success of students with disabilities as measured by graduation is well below that of students without disabilities. And I do want to say the youths with significant disabilities or youths with developmental and intellectual disabilities, especially in the state of Missouri, have lots of different choices for them to go on to a college experience. UCM has the Thrive program, which I'm involved with, and UMKC, UMSL, Evangel, and I hear there's 2 more that are getting ready to start in our state. So we could have as many as 7 different areas in the state that could assist those students after high school. So I would look into those programs depending on where your area is and make sure you know what options there are for your students. Residential alternatives. There's apartment living, like apartment clusters, co-residence apartments, or maximum independence compartments. And what I would look at there, look up Mission Project. In Mission, Kansas, they have 2 different now. There's Mission Project 1 and Mission Project 2. I would look at both of those to see what they are like to give you some ideas about some residential alternatives. Foster homes provide temporary residential services, also has more opportunities to interact with and be accepted by the community at large. And there's also group homes that provide family-style living for a small group of individuals. There's also supported living, helping people with disabilities live in the community as independently and normally as possible. And there's also institutions. Criticized in the 1960s and 1970s for their inability to provide individualized services in a comfortable, humane, and normalized environment. Deinstitutionalization, the movement of people with disabilities out of large institutions and even into small, community-based living environments has been an active reality for the past 40 years. Recreation and leisure. The activities do not come easily for many adults with disabilities. So many times high school classes, when they're working with the lower functioning students, they will work and have rec and leisure as part of their curriculum so that they can get them used to where they can go, who they can go with, and what they can do in their community. Challenges to use community recreational resources include transportation. So you need to make sure the students are aware of the transportation in their hometown. Physical ability or skills to play the game, and other willing and able friends with whom to play. Special educators must realize the importance of including training and for recreation and leisure in curricula for school-age children with disabilities. And learning appropriate recreation and leisure skills is particularly important for adults with severe disabilities. So I'd like to do now is look at another question. How do the philosophy and principles of supported living differ for those associated with traditional residential placement services? So if you will look at that and write down what your thoughts are, and then we'll come back to the answer. Well, supported living, as we've discussed earlier, is a term used to describe the process of assisting adults with disabilities in living as normal a life as possible. Supported living is not a place or a single set of procedures, but rather reflects a belief system that adults with disabilities should, to the highest extent possible, be able to make independent decisions about where they live, how they live, and how they spend their time and money. Conversely, traditional residential placement services often do not reflect a normal standard of living that adults without disabilities enjoy. For example, outside of the college fraternity, most adults do not live in a group home. So let's talk about the last big question, the ultimate goal. Well, a better quality of life is the ultimate goal for transition. Adults with disabilities continue to face lack of acceptance as full members of society, misguided and limiting presumptions, handicapism, a discriminatory treatment and biased reactions towards someone with a disability occurs on a personal, professional, and societal levels. Self-advocacy and self-determination. Persons with disability have begun to assert the legal rights, challenging the view that persons with disabilities are incapable of speaking for themselves. When we still have a long way to go, I would highly suggest that if you are a high school teacher, that you start trying to implement the legal abilities and the legal rights of students with disabilities in your curriculum, so that before they leave, they start to understand what their rights are, because it is their right and they need to understand it. And lastly, I want you to read listen to my transitional story, another YouTube video about transition, to help again you finalize this chapter on transition. Last question. Should quality of life for adults with disabilities be the ultimate outcome measure of special education? Why or why not? I know we talked about it just a little bit ago, but give your idea. This will help you have a better understanding. All right. Hopefully you wrote down some good ideas. Ultimately, quality of life should be the outcome measure of all educational programs, including those programs with students with disabilities. A person may not have been taught many skills, but if those skills do not enable him to enjoy the benefits available in personal, social, work, and leisure settings, the wrong skills have been taught, and a disservice has been done to that individual. When selecting and prioritizing specific skills to teach students with disabilities, teachers must consider the extent to which those skills will ultimately help improve the student's quality of life, especially as you're looking at a high school realm, and probably even for those students with severe disabilities, the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade range should be discussed in that range too as part of their curriculum. Lastly, I've got a couple websites I wanted you to look at, give you an idea of what's out there. The first one is a Warrensburg High School. Actually, it's a district special education website, and I double-checked, had to change the link, but it's got some ideas of what parents would need to know. And then the Transition Coalition website that you all have been on has a lot more ideas about transition, and I'd highly recommend making sure that you keep that website open and available as you start to learn more about the process of special education, and especially transition in general. That's the last part of that. Remember, you do have your assignments that are due this week. As far as the discussion board for Chapter 15, it's pretty self-explanatory. Let me get to it here. It's your final discussion. Ask you in the course evaluation. I really do want to see what you have to say about this class and about ways for me to improve. I'm human, and there are things that I need to continue to improve. And I'm hoping that as I go, it gets a little bit easier, but I do need to see what your thoughts are about the class. So take that time, and because of that, all you need to do is get online. You don't need to tell me anything you said. You can just say, I took the evaluation as your post, and that's it. If you want to add some kind words, you may, but that's not a requirement. All you need to do is let me know that you've taken it, and then I'll take your word for it that you've taken it, and then I'll give you some points for the final discussion board. Anyway, it was great having you in class, and hope you have a good last week of class, and good luck on your other finals. I'll talk to you later.